Welcome back to another episode of the Marketing Quacks podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Dozer, and if you're new to the show, the mission here is to expose the quacks and gimmicks in the marketing industry while featuring some great marketers and entrepreneurs along the way. On this episode, I'm excited to welcome Corey Morris. Now, Corey is the founder and CEO of Voltage, which is a digital marketing agency in Kansas City. He's an author, speaker, and an expert in all things digital marketing. So, Corey, thank you so much for hopping on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we kind of dive into all this ever-changing stuff of digital marketing and AI here, do a quick background on kind of who you are and what you're doing at Voltage.
Yeah, so Voltage is in its 20th year. We a couple of years ago niched down. We didn't start with industries. We actually looked at our services. So we became a specialist in the things that we felt like we're best at, which are search marketing, both paid and organic, and website design and development. So we were a creative shop and a full service digital shop and doing all the stuff and really just honed in on that. Additionally, everything that we do is really focused on getting the strategy right and doing the hard work of planning it out properly. I know we're going to talk about a whole bunch of stuff related to all those disruptions that are happening, but that led to me writing my first book last year, Digital Marketing Success Plan, and really being able to articulate a framework and a 5-step process to work through that. So that's the short of all the things going on in our shop. But yeah, a lot of fun things happening in the industry right now, of course.
Yeah, for sure. So before we dive into your book here shortly, what would you say is that number one thing that separates Voltage from, let's be honest, the thousands of marketing agencies out there that they claim they're the best at this, they're the best at that? What's that one thing that separates Voltage?
Yeah, there are other great shops that do some similar things, but what I've learned and my VP of strategy, who's also involved in a lot of the front end conversations with prospects, we've learned to sell ourselves out of deals. We've had to build the muscle and build the discipline over the last few years to recognize opportunities, even if somebody takes a metaphorical bag of money and puts it on the table and says, I want paid search ads and here's my budget, to be able to say time out and ask enough questions to understand, is this a long-term opportunity and a right fit for us, where we'll have a good partnership for years? Or is this something where we rush into this, everybody's excited, and then 6 months in that we're not working together and nobody's happy? So again, others are doing that, but it's not something, when I walk into a pitch, it's a different mindset and a different conversation, and sometimes refreshing on the other side of the table for them to say, oh, you're asking me business questions. You didn't just rush into one tactic or one marketing thing or put me into the cookie cutter machine.
Yeah, and that was actually the inspiration for this podcast, man, if I'm being honest, is there are so many quacks and gimmicks in the marketing world, and that's why I like talking to people who have actually done this in the real world and talk about the business side of it versus just the cookie cutter stuff, like you just alluded to get you into that annual contract where now you're handcuffed, you can't do anything, you still got to pay us, right? I've been through all the gimmicks here that a lot of agencies like to push. So let's talk about your book now, the Digital Marketing Success Plan. Sounds really obvious in theory, Corey, right? But how do you actually practice this, and why do so many digital campaigns fail?
Yeah, there are a number of, probably 5 or 6 specific reasons that I see it. In fact, I used some very real stories in the book. I wove those in, so it's not just, theory and process, but some narrative and some things that bring it to life. I changed names to protect the innocent, but and so I could be able to, super transparent. But to what you just mentioned in terms of, gimmicks and tactics. I've had a few people be disappointed initially when I've handed them the book, or they looked at it and realized it wasn't just that one magical thing, that one quick answer that you could find in chapter 6 that would, be the thing to do tomorrow. But it's more of a choose your own adventure opportunity. It's a framework and a process that you've got to go through to land on what your ideal plan is. And so it's a 5-step framework. It's an acronym called START that naturally puts things in the order that you should always put them in, from strategy to tactics to the assets and things that you need to apply to review, and the things that you need to report on, and transformation being the last step of creating the roadmap to actually see it through. But some of the things that the reasons for it and things that fail are, we just did a set of tactics, even if they're the right tactics and the right best practices, without context of why you're doing them or connected back to a goal and a strategy and what makes you money, then you're going to waste a lot of effort, maybe a lot of dollars, with just kind of this aimless floating set of things you're doing. And so that's one of the big ones. And that's one of the starting points we often see is somebody has an agency or has been doing it in-house or wearing one of many hats doing SEO, for example, where you can just get lost in the abyss of doing all the activity and not have it pay off for you, especially nowadays.
Yeah, everyone always likes to throw that out there too. But if there were business owners listening to this podcast right now that could focus on just one thing to improve on, maybe this quarter or this year, what would that be at a high level?
Yeah, that's making sure that you have consistent effort. And it's tied to what your ultimate goal is. If you have any question about whether your digital marketing is working or not, that's a red flag to me. I'm doubling and tripling down on the fact that digital marketing is an investment and not an expense. All right. And with anything with the economic times or anything that happens, right, when people comb through what expenses or line items to maybe look at, if you're tempted to do anything adjusting your marketing, chances are you're seeing it as an expense and not an investment, because you're not able to connect the dots to see whether it's returning on that investment for you.
One thing that I've learned along the way, Corey, dealing with many clients, is there's always a correlation between those who invest a lot of money in marketing and success. Just an interesting observation that I've had there. Now, obviously, marketing agencies and marketers aren't apples to apples. There's the bad side of marketing, there's a good side of marketing, but that's just one observation I've had over the years is those who aren't afraid to what I call to roll out the Amex on marketing typically have success as an ROI off of that investment.
Yeah, because you're willing to put real money into something, and with real money and that commitment comes hopefully the accountability. Yes, I've seen big amounts of money wasted, but there's more accountability typically when you are putting the MX out there and you're willing to spend, to make sure that it's working for you versus just throwing a huge pile of money at something and just assuming it's gone.
Yeah, for sure. So you mentioned one of your expertise is in search marketing. Let's just talk about the SEO component here because there's a lot of stuff shaking up in the SEO industry right now. So in your opinion, we're seeing a rise in AI driven search, Google AI overviews, LLM, AI search engines like Perplexity. How do you approach your SEO strategy with AI driven search becoming so prevalent?
Yeah, on both sides of search, paid and organic, my focus has been I've been in SEO for 20 years now, and in search in general as well. Our focus has been on quality and that end goal metric, whatever that conversion is, and even beyond the conversion of that business goal to map to. I learned the hard way early in my career, of presenting a report back when it wasn't even dashboard. It was printed report to a client that showed all these impressions and clicks and even conversions with form submissions, and the gut punch of him saying, well, that's great, after he listened to the entire presentation, but I didn't get a single new piece of business out of that. And so those are, the marketing KPIs, digital marketing and search KPIs are great, right? You need them to get to the ultimate business outcome. But if you're not starting backwards and looking at quality and what actually drives that, then you're just looking at those vanity metrics. And one of the biggest vanity metrics is traffic. But even conversions can be a hidden one if it's not
For
mapped
sure.
out to CRM and all the way through to business. So
What is a conversion? A lot of people don't like to talk about
yeah.
that.
Yeah. And so quality versus quantity. I have some clients who are definitely seeing less search traffic, but the number of conversions in business is steady because we've anchored to the higher quality set of traffic in there, and stopped carrying and shifted their mindset away from how many visits and how many page views to what it always should have been on, of how is it impacting your business. And so that's one piece of it. Another one is more of a diversification of sources, right? We're not in some ways, I look at as a huge positive that we're not going to be as reliant on Google, and one big behemoth source for most of that traffic and what rules that they want us to follow versus the opportunity to be found in a lot of different sources.
So let's talk about ranking factors then in an AI driven search world. What do you believe to be the most important ranking factors?
Yeah, so quality of content validated in many cases by engagement, not just content that we're putting out there to in a way to meet whatever content marketing goals we have
That's a
for.
whole podcast in itself. What is quality content? Everyone says just great quality content. It's like, well, what does that mean? You know?
Yeah, so then we create a list based on our personas and what questions we think they're answering, or what FAQs or whatever thought leadership. But there's often a gap, right, between the thought leadership we want to produce and that we feel comfortable producing, but what people are really looking for. And in some cases, that's changing rapidly based on disruptions in your industry or even in the marketplace, or all these multivariate things that are happening. So understand, we got to go beyond just writing to a persona that's on a nice PDF that we created in our brand strategy process, but it's really almost weekly understanding and doing things in GA4 that are not out of the box to make sure we understand the traffic sources and where people are and how it's shifting and what they're looking for. And so um, I'm looking at, in Chat GPT and asking questions and querying to make sure I'm showing up where I want to. And some of that is not just it's feeding an AI engine or an LLM in different ways, but maybe with some of the same content that I would be putting on my website. But it's not just assuming that you can just throw it on your website like you did 10 years ago and be found.
Yeah, for sure. I completely agree. So we hear it all the time, right? SEO is dead, blah, blah, blah. You hear this every single year. I actually do believe that top of funnel and informational SEO is dying a slow death. What is this? How to do this, right? All the AI, search engines and overviews that kind of eat those queries up. What are your thoughts on just the whole SEO is dead or dying argument?
Yeah, I write for Search Engine Land and Search Engine Journal, and I've had the opportunity to write and talk about some of these "is it dead"
Right.
cliche headlines over the years, and whether it's truly dead or if it's going to evolve, or we're going to call it something else, or it's going to broaden. I'm not as concerned about that, but when it comes to top of the funnel, you're absolutely right. I mean, we have to think now about more sources and ways to be found. And so for me, like I just said, making sure that we're feeding in content and training open source models and being able to be found in closed source models of what they started with, and understanding where that's going is critical. So for some, it's overwhelming and it's hard to think about that evolution and where we're going, and being able to learn that new landscape and influence it. For others, it's super exciting because again, we don't have to be beholden to Google and one set of rules that were never set up for the web publisher. They were set up for the end user, the searcher. So I think there's still room for that top of the funnel how-to content, but you have to know where it's being sought out
Right.
and how to influence where it's going to be. Because to your point, it's not going to be necessarily that blue link click in Google. It's going to be fed into the AI overview, or it's going to be sought out in a different LLM or different source.
Yeah, or maybe those could still be link bait pieces too, where people, use those and you get backlinks from it, right? And actually, on that topic, I truly believe that one of the most important ranking factors in SEO as we move towards an AI-driven zero-click experience environment is actually brand equity or personal brand equity if you're trying to
Yes.
rank for a personal brand, because all of these platforms still need bullet points, or they still need guidelines to tell them how a source is credible. How do they determine what source to place in the SERP or the results, right? And so backlinks, brand mentions, being on podcasts, I think this stuff's even going to become more important in an AI driven world.
I 100% agree. You beat me to it on talking about brand equity and building your brand and distinguishing it from others, right? As an authority, and PR goes hand in hand with that too. And it's so funny that we're coming back around to some of the more traditional aspects of marketing and communications, but with a more digital lens and application to them. And yeah, I think both branding and brand equity and PR are a huge part of that, because how do you stand out and how do you differentiate Those shouldn't have ever gone away or gotten diminished or pushed aside in favor of just producing, a factory of content. But with that emphasis on quality, and which connects directly into authority and trust signals, which are consistent across all those platforms, that's super important.
Yeah, for sure. Let's shift over to AI a little bit more even further. So, what about the use of AI would you say kind of excites you in marketing the most? And also, where do you think marketers should be most cautious of using AI?
Yeah, personally, the things I was looking at getting, a virtual assistant for a couple of years ago, are solved in 90% by,
Copywriting, content
yeah,
writing,
by
yeah.
AI. And so, I've got 24,000 words in my book, and be able to, I've spent enough dozens and dozens of hours training. And it's almost scary now how I'm like, oh, there's one word in there that the only of that entire article, only one word in there that I don't normally use. But I'm like, I'm gonna actually gonna start using that word. I like that. Like where it's, as a consumer, maybe, and if I took myself out of it, maybe I'd be a little scared of how well it can write and replicate my voice and tone. I mean, again, it's crap and it's slop if you don't train it and you're just
Sure.
throwing it out there. But the further I've invested in it, the more excited I get and the more surprised I am, like weekly. It's something new I was able to do, because my filter is anything I don't like to do, don't have time to do. Any of those filters, if I can't do that, then I throw it in at an AI tool. And in many cases now, I'm finally getting what I was hoping for a year and a half ago, when things started out. So I'm excited about where it's going. And again, the disruption at a more macro level of Google and others, and diversifying and giving us opportunities, and how it's shaken up the industry has been good for me. But I always emphasize that if you are someone who chases that shiny object, that new tech thing, put some parameters around it, because you can go into an endless abyss of testing everything and lose focus on what's working today. Or vice versa, if you're someone who gets to the end of every day and you feel guilt that you didn't have a chance to test that AI thing, or feel like you're behind, well, hint, we all feel like that, even my friends who are on the leading edge of some things. um, Block out some intentional time, schedule it into your week or your month, and don't get left behind. So there's a crazy balance that we've all got to find.
Yeah, you're preaching to the choir, man. I run an AI YouTube channel and I feel like I'm behind just listening to all this stuff. But what's so funny about that you point that you alluded to, new tools here, new AI models here. Well, most AI tools are using the same technology. It's just the APIs from OpenAI or Anthropic, and they're repackaging it into a nice looking interface with buttons and marketing. And it's like people just do not understand how any of this SaaS stuff works. So kind of getting a little more tactical here. You mentioned you're using a lot of customized versions of AI to write a book or write content. Is this Claude? Is this Chat GPT? Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I test a lot of the different platforms and models and open source. In fact, I have to keep reminding myself to not get so comfortable that I accidentally put, financials or something confidential out into an open source one, as I'm talking with it like it's my friend. And so I'm still heavily in Chat GPT. I know it's not the best or perfect or trendy one in some cases for some content uses and applications, but at the same time, I look at how much I've invested in training it. And I go to Gemini or anything else, which is built into my Google Workspace suite for work, and I could have it for free essentially for what I'm paying, versus paying separately for Chat GPT. But then I look at the trade-off of all those, maybe 100 hours of what I've done to train it to get it where it is, and replatforming, even going from one account to another in the same it's like, I don't want to have to reinvest all of that again. So yes, I'm testing everything I can, but at the same time, the one I'm still with is trying to maximize return on my investment in different ways of training in Chat GPT.
Is this custom GPTs, Chat GPT projects? What are you doing there?
Yeah, I'm in most of it. I've organized by projects. We've tested, and we have a couple of custom. We have to be careful with a few client things naturally in industries with compliance and other regulations too. So some closed things that we've worked on, versus open source.
Yeah, for sure. So, in addition to copywriting and whatnot, what would you say are some other top use cases that marketers should be leveraging AI for, just on a foundational level?
Yeah, a lot of efficiency things, right? So any type of database, any type of brief, any type of background aspect, and some of those areas are important in two ways. One, from a search perspective, I'm understanding what kind of results it's returning and how to prompt better and how to essentially query things that I need. Two, how it's returning the results and what you do with it, and that's outside of like the production part and efficiency. So some of the day-to-day use of it, it's like, oh, that's interesting, it returned that to me, or I click, turn on this option for research mode and what I got back. So some of it's just living in it and being in it as someone using it, but then also thinking about how my clients or my clients, the customers, are using it as well. So there's kind of a twofold aspect of, yes, using it consistently helps me out in my business with efficiencies and production and scaling, but also understanding where it's going and how user behavior is impacted by it too.
Yeah, for sure. And at a very foundational level, I always tell people ideation. I mean, if you don't know the answer to anything, go to AI and try to find a solution. Gone are the days. I mean, people still go to Google to look for solutions, but now we have AI in our pocket. So go to AI to try to find solutions, snap the writer's block, and get the juices flowing. That's what I
Well,
always tell people.
and I find myself often prompting and prompting and prompting, but then I'm like, I don't know what it doesn't know yet, and I could be wasting time. So some of the best areas where I've used it are, I'm sitting, in a waiting room, for a doctor's appointment or something. I'm like, hey, ask me questions about this. What do you want to know? What do you need to know to be able to produce this thing for me? And almost have it interview me. And that's
Yeah.
actually more fun than me trying to guess what to prompt and put into it when I'm training it. Have it interview me, have it challenge me. And then it's almost like taking a survey versus trying to think of all the things that I think it needs to know.
Yeah, for sure. That's a really good use case as well. So now we're going to move on to my favorite segment of the show, Corey, where we define marketing quack. So a marketing quack is just any trick or gimmick that you see in the marketing industry, which there are a lot of them. What would be a big marketing quack for you?
Yeah, so there are a billion experts in the social media space, just like there are in the search space. So I'm going to take this out of my space, not my space literally, but out of my personal industry space, and go look at social media. There are so many different conflicting people talking about this one thing you need to do on LinkedIn, right? And LinkedIn, I love it because it's everybody's kind of consolidated around it. It's having its big continued growth moment, but that there's always this one trick. It's like, do this type of post, or do these 17 posts a week, or do this. And then I get emails, marketing emails from 15 different gurus over there that all say different conflicting things. And then I spoke at an event last week, and somebody said, I'm doing all the things that they say to do and I'm getting no engagement. What am I doing wrong? And that's the problem, is like, you're listening to one thing and you're not just trusting your own content. You're not testing on your own. You're not testing and validating against a lot of those. So unfortunately, that's a world where there's a lot of just do this one magic thing and it's going to solve all of your problems and give you the engagement or the leads or whatever you want. And that's a quick way to spend a lot of time and get nothing back.
Yeah, I mean, you know this as well as I do. The answer to everything in marketing is it depends. Depends on the
Yeah.
situation, depends on the niche, depends on who you are, the type of content. I mean, there's so many different variables to this stuff. But that's the biggest way to spot a marketing fraud, in my opinion. Those who talk in certainties, saying there's only one way to do this, or this is the guaranteed way to do that, right? So that's definitely a red flag too, from what you just elaborated on there. So, Corey, this has been fun. Any final concluding notes, really, and just anything that we discussed in this episode?
In light of all the changes, I would say it's critically important to have a documented plan. Now, that plan has to have agility in it and it's going to change, but have a plan of that documents what your goals are, what you're doing, and why you're doing it, even if you have to say time out 2 weeks in and it changed, because otherwise you're just floating and chasing these things. So I have to take my own advice and make sure that what I'm doing isn't just chasing some shiny object, on a Tuesday, and I wasted a whole day or blew up my whole plan or it had no ROI behind it. But I think that's the point I want to hammer home, is to make sure that you understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. If it's testing something new, that's fine, but make sure there are parameters around that and it doesn't become your marketing plan or you lost sight of what was working.
Yeah, for sure. So where can people follow you online to learn more about what you're doing?
Yeah, so more on the book. It's called the Digital Marketing Success Plan. That's a long domain name, so it's shortened to the dmsp.com. You can find the framework over there. It's got a link over to Amazon for the book, or for anything that I or my team might be able to help with in my agency. That's voltage.digital.
Sounds good, man. I'll leave you all those links and give you the SEO juice of all the podcast platforms, as you very well know. So, Corey, thank you so much again for joining this episode of the Marketing Quacks podcast. And everyone listening, be sure to tune in again next time.
Thanks, Ryan.